I thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on House Resolution 372.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I submit in the Congressional record an exchange of letters between myself and the chairs of the Committees on Financial Services, Oversight and Reform, Ways and Means, and the Judiciary on House Resolution 372.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased to rise in strong support of this measure to address the developing situation with Turkey. I want to thank my colleagues who joined me to introduce this legislation. First and foremost, Ranking Member McCall, Leader Hoyer, Minority Leader McCarthy, Chairwoman Lowy, Ranking Member Granger, Chairman Nadler, and Ranking Member Collins. Madam Speaker, Turkey is a NATO ally and a nation with which we have had a long history of friendship and partnership, but I'm deeply troubled by the direction that President Erdogan is taking his country. During this time in office, we've watched as Erdogan has turned Turkey into an authoritarian state, attacking the democratic values that our two nations had shared for many years. He's cracked down on freedom of the press, thrown innocent people in jail for voicing opposition, and consolidated his grip on power at the expense of Turkey's democratic institutions. And his troubling behavior doesn't stop there. Erdogan is cozying up to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, putting the security interests of the United States and the NATO alliance at risk. Turkey's plan to acquire the Russian S-400 air defense system would threaten American security and do lasting damage to our historic bilateral relationship. It simply cannot happen, especially while Turkey is still a U.S. and NATO ally, participating in the F-35 program and hoping to acquire these planes. Today's resolution gets at this very issue. If Turkey wants to continue as a NATO ally and U.S. partner, it must commit to upholding our shared interests. And if Turkey decides to follow through on its plan to acquire the Russian S-400, then they must not be able to get American F-35s. They must not participate in the F-35 program, and they must face the consequences of their decision. And it's not that the United States is unable to comprehend Turkey's need for air defense. In fact, we've offered the Patriot anti-aircraft, anti-missile defense system, the top of the line in our inventory. That offer remains on the table. We rarely see it in foreign affairs, but this is simply a black and white issue. There's no middle ground. Either Mr. Erdogan cancels the Russian deal or he doesn't. And there is no future for Turkey having both Russian weapons and American F-35s. There's no third option. There's no path for mitigation that will allow Turkey to have its cake and eat it too. We cannot risk exposing our national security technology to Russia. There's no partisan divide on this issue. The State Department, the Defense Department, the Treasury, even Vice President Pence have all been raising the alarm and urging President Erdogan to cancel the sale. I hope President Trump listens to his advisors and makes sure Turkey's leaders understand the consequences of their actions. And the consequences are serious. If Turkey follows through with the acquisition of the S-400, it would trigger sanctions that Congress overwhelmingly bipartisanly passed 2 years ago. It's critical that Turkey know that the United States will use these tools if the situation arises. In the meantime, it's important that we pass this measure and send a clear message the United States will not sit by as Erdogan turns Turkey into an authoritarian state aligned with our adversary Russia. Let me say that again. It's important that we pass this measure and send a clear message. The United States will not sit idly by as Erdogan turns Turkey into an authoritarian state aligned with our adversary Russia. So I'm pleased to support this, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of this resolution that Chairman Engel and I introduced because of our serious concerns regarding the United States-Turkey alliance. Turkey has been a member of NATO for almost 70 years. Through our bilateral and multilateral relationship, we've worked together to advance our shared objectives. However, I am deeply disturbed and concerned that our relationship is increasingly characterized by bumps in the road. And right now, we are all watching as Turkey stands at a fork in the road. This summer, Turkey is scheduled to obtain the Russian S-400 defense system. Purchasing the S-400 would have unavoidable negative consequences for U.S.-Turkey relations. By law, the purchase would trigger congressionally mandated sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions law. The purchase always puts at risk Turkish participation in the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program and broader security cooperation, including future U.S. arms sales. The F-35 program promotes NATO interoperability. Turkey's decision to complete the purchase of the S-400 would erode its partnership in this multilateral alliance. And while we are deeply, deeply concerned about our alliance with Turkey, we very much want to rehabilitate our relationship. Both sides of a bilateral partnership need to take steps towards strengthening and preserving it. That is why this resolution expresses full support for the United States government's offer to sell Turkey the Patriot system if Turkey does not acquire the S-400. We want to give Turkey the ability to accommodate its security needs without endangering its place in NATO. So Turkey really has a clear binary choice between buying Russian S-400s and the U.S. offer to accelerate the delivery of the Patriot missiles. So I call upon Turkey to now step forward and choose the United States and NATO over Russia. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I don't have any speakers on this side. May I ask the gentleman if there are any speakers on the minority side?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I have one
reserves.
speaker.
I reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and I want to thank the Chairman as well. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 372, expressing concern for the United States-Turkey alliance. Turkey has failed in its basic NATO responsibility to safeguard the freedom and security of NATO allies, both politically and militarily. Turkey has bullied and continues to bully the U.S. and NATO allies around the world, in particular Greece and Cyprus. Meanwhile, Turkey has grown ever closer in diplomatic and military ties to the authoritarian regimes of Russia and Iran, sowing international instability, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, Madam Speaker, which is why I join my colleagues in introducing H.R. 91 to reaffirm the robust commitment of the United States to the importance of the United States, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus partnership. The Russian S-400 missile defense system is in no way interoperable with NATO's defense systems and represents a dangerous vulnerability to the F-35 program. And the event an S-400 system user learns how to target lock F-35s and shares that knowledge with other international bad actors. We can't take that chance. Rewarding an international bad actor with F-35s, one of the most sophisticated articles of U.S. military technology, while they imprison and orchestrate brazen acts of violence against U.S. citizens, threaten U.S. allies and their sovereignty, and violate international law, sends the strong message to the enemies of freedom and stability around the world. The clock has nearly struck midnight in the U.S.-Turkey relationship, and the time has come for Turkey to choose whether it will stand with the United States and NATO or fall with revisionist powers like Russia and China. In closing, Madam Speaker, I'd like to applaud my good friends, Chairman Engel and Ranking Member McCall, along with Leaders Hoyle and McCarthy, and the leadership of both the House Appropriations and Judiciary Committees who made this possible. And I urge my colleagues to pass this bill, this resolution. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
And I ask to yield myself the remainder of the time I have. Let me just say this. Chairman Engel and I met with the foreign minister of Turkey and their ambassador, trying to avoid this impasse, this choice between Russia and the United States. And I thought Chairman Engel and I talked about this alliance that we've had with them nearly 70 years ago. NATO and the United States stood with Turkey against growing Soviet aggression. In fact, that's the reason NATO was formed in the first place. That's why we have an Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey. And yet the idea that Turkey would break from this alliance and choose Russia over the United States truly is a defining moment for Turkey. And I hope they're listening to this debate as we speak right now. And they still have time to salvage this, what I consider to be an error in judgment of choosing Russia over NATO and the United States of America. That's why this resolution is so important. It sends a very strong message to Erdogan and to Turkey that we are not going to allow this to happen. And in fact, it would run afoul of the sanctions that we passed almost unanimously, overwhelmingly in the House and Senate against Russia. It would violate the Russia sanctions law. So with that, I want to thank Chairman Engel for his strong bipartisan support on this issue. We're on the right side of history, and I urge my colleagues to support. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
Once again, I'm pleased to support this bipartisan measure that strengthens our security policy in Europe. I thank Ranking Member McCall and all the other chairs and ranking members of important committees who have stood by us on this bill. It's really Congress speaking with one voice in a very bipartisan fashion for something that's really very important. Today's resolution reaffirms the historic partnership between the United States and Turkey, and it lays the groundwork for how Erdogan can start to put this relationship back on the right track. We cannot stand by as he turns this NATO ally into an authoritarian regime aligned with Vladimir Putin. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.